Good morning. We are at Parshat Shlach, which
Shalach.
is a very controversial Torah portion because anybody remember what is the topic of Shlach?
Shalach gossip? No.
Shlach means to send.
Oh, okay.
Send. Who are we sending? Who remembers? Vayedaber Hashem el Moshe lemar. And God spoke to Moshe saying, Shalach lecha Anashim, send for yourself men and have them scout out the land of Canaan, which I am giving the Jewish people, every man for their tribe. And Rashi says, what does it mean, Shalach lecha, send for yourself? Which means that God says, I already told you the land of Israel is good. You don't need to scout out the land. But you want to scout out the land, scout out the land. And why does God have to say Anashim? Because God says to Moshe, really, if you want to send scouts, send women. You'll
Right.
send women, they'll come back with the right report. You'll send men,
Uh,
I'm not so sure what's going to happen, as we've seen in the past with the sin of the golden calf, where the
mm,
women did not give their jewelry. And the faith of the women throughout the exodus from Egypt, we saw, was very much stronger than the faith of the men. So God says, if you're going to send, maybe already send women. But Moshe doesn't send women. He sends 12 leaders. Who are these leaders? They are the elite of every tribe, except from the tribe of Levi, the tribe of the Kohanim, because they were not getting an official parcel of land like everyone else, because they were working in the Holy Temple. So what did they get? They got like 38 cities were allocated to the families of the Kohanim and the Leviim. But from the family of Joseph, Joseph, the multicolored coat, who was sold by his brothers, Menashe and Ephraim, from his family, his two sons were also considered. So that's why it ended up being 12 men. And let's see what happens. They go and they go to the land, they scout out the land, and what happens when they come back? Anybody knows what happens? Do they come back with a good report? Do they come back with not such a good report?
oh, giants, right? They
Very
report
good.
giants. Yeah.
So now they come back. And what do they say? We except for two, Kalev ben Yefunah, the husband of Miriam the prophetess, and Hoshea ben Nun. Now his name became Yehoshua, Joshua. Joshua and Caleb were the only two scouts that came back and did not give a negative report. What did the other 10 say to everyone? And Moshe gave them specific things to look for. Moshe told them what to look for. See the land. How is it? Are they strong, the people that live there? Are they weak? Are they few? Are they numerous? Is the land good? How are the cities? Are they open? Are they fortified? Moshe gave them a list of what to look for. So they come back and they say, we came to the land to which you sent us. I'm quoting the English from the Pasuk, from the Passion. It flows with milk and honey. And then they show this is its fruit. It was beautiful fruit, abundant fruit, big fruit. When you go to Israel to the Shuk, you really can see the produce, the taste is something spectacular. However, the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. We cannot go up against the people. They are stronger than we are. The land through which we have gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people that we saw are giants, great height. And
Mm.
this is the clincher, we seem to be like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them. So, how do they conclude the report? We were like grasshoppers compared to them. And they looked at us also as grasshoppers. And then this one ending line will tell us what happened here, will tell us the tragedy of what happened here. So now we have to ask many questions. Anybody have any questions they want to ask about the story? Wait, let me finish. So God says to Moshe, they don't want to go into the land. So now you will not go into the land. You
Mm,
will spend another 40 years in the desert,
mm.
and all the men from age 20 to 60 will die out during those years. And the next generation and the women and those under 20 will inherit the land. And that's what happens.
Oh, I
40
have
more
chills.
years, they wander around the desert and they inherit the land. Moshe passes away, and Joshua, his successor, leads the Jewish people into the land of Israel and conquers it with God's hand and settles it. That's the end of this story. Not in this Torah portion, but I'm summing up the story. So, what are the questions you want to ask? You have any questions to the story?
Why did they do that?
Why did they do what?
Why did the men come back with false information?
Was it false information?
Maybe their interpretation of it.
Yeah, okay.
Mm.
Okay, good question. Good question. Let me ask you also, let me give you a hint to one of the questions. What did they just come from? Miracle upon miracle. The
Yeah,
10 plagues in Egypt. They saw how an entire empire was demolished. An entire Iran was wiped out practically, right? Then they come to the Red Sea. Do they have to take motorboats or rowboats to row across? The sea splits. Then they come to Sinai and they hear the voice of God and they get the Torah and there's lightning and thunder. And then they're traveling. There's water from a rock that rolls with them. There's manna from heaven every day. They don't have to go to the laundromat. Their clothes are automatically washed.
they're a little spoiled.
Yeah, everything and anything. And there's a cloud by day that goes over them to protect them from the heat. By night, they have a pillar of fire that gives them warmth and light and protects them from scorpions and snakes.
Mm.
So why would they think that conquering the land is any different? What, they think God is now going to say, okay, go in with your drones? They don't even have drones. Do they even have weapons? So why would they even think that they have to conquer the land themselves? They forgot that God is the one taking them right in? Question number one, right? What happened to their faith? Two, why is God punishing them for telling the truth? They said there's giants and there's giant fruit. Isn't that true? And the cities are fortified and the people are strong. When they sinned with the golden calf, God didn't say, I'm going to wipe everyone out. You're going to have to live in the desert another 40 years because of the sin of the golden calf. The instigators died by a plague, and the rest went on. Is God punishing them for telling the truth? And God says to Moshe, you want to send spies? Send spies. God didn't say, absolutely not. Do not send spies. God said, you want to send? You could send. I'm staying out of it. So if God didn't specifically say, don't send scouts, why? God can't have a complaint to them. And lastly, what does Moshe say to God when God says they're going to 40 years, they're going to stay in the desert, you're going to stay, and all the men are going to die out, and the next generation will go in with the women. Moshe says, if you do that, what are the Egyptians going to say? God can't fulfill his promise to the Israelites, to the Jews. He can't even bring them into Israel. They're wandering around the desert for 40 years. How are you going to look to the nations of the world? Moshe says. Does God really care what the neighbor says? Does God care? Every time your neighbor sees you do something, do you have to justify to your neighbors, to your friends, to your family every time you do something? Do you really care what the whole neighborhood says? If you live your life by keeping up with the Joneses, oy vey. So how is this an argument to God? Couldn't Moshe have thought of a better argument? Like, God, you promised them the land. Give it to them already. Stop stalling. Moshe could have had so many arguments. And my last question is, Moshe didn't send the rabble rousers to scout out the land. He sent the creme de la creme. The leaders of every tribe went.
Mm.
So if you send rabble rousers and troublemakers, prisoners, convicts, you don't want to send people you value. You want to send the dregs of society. Okay, you can't have a taina. Who did you send? You sent the criminals. In all those movies, they free the criminals to do these insane projects for the government. All these movies are based on that.
Yeah, like that show, TV series, The 100, where the
Yeah,
criminals come back
right.
and the world's destroyed, and they have to, whatever.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Moshe chose the creme de la creme. And then one final question is, how come Yoshua and Kalev didn't go with the rest? What kept them apart from the rest of the scouts? Usually you're swayed by the jury. If all your peers say like this, you go along with everyone. What
Yeah.
gave them the fortitude not to be part of the 10 who spoke negatively? So there's a fellow who travels and he always takes an aisle seat. And he's OCD. He always calls the airline 3 times. Do I get the aisle seat? Aisle seat? Absolutely. He comes to the airport. He got his boarding pass. He says he gets a window seat. Window seat? He's horrified. He's furious. Comes home after the trip. His wife said, honey, how did it go? Horrible. Why? I got a window seat. 3 times I told them I want an aisle seat. I got a window seat. So she says, honey, why didn't you ask the person in the aisle seat to switch with you? He says, I couldn't. She said, why? There was no one in the seat.
That's funny. That's really funny. Let me think about that now, how deep that
Okay.
is.
So what's a
Okay.
pessimist? A
Yeah.
pessimist who sends out a telegram. Bad news coming soon. Start worrying.
God.
Okay. Okay. No, really, it's like this. Start worrying. Details to follow. That's a pessimist sends out a telegram. So the root of this answer is, and really is so relevant to us, because we all face in our lives the moments of truth, challenges, where we just want to say, we can't do it. It's over. We cannot possibly achieve this goal. I can't do it. I'm not doing it. I can't do it. And if you tell yourself you can't do something, you can't do it.
Mm.
The human mind is so powerful that if you say, I can't do it, a child says, Ma, I'm not going to be able to pass the test. They're not going to pass their test.
Yeah.
So the scouts said to themselves, we can't conquer the land. They lost their faith.
Mm.
Did they really think that God was just going to give them spears and bows and arrows to conquer powerful warriors? Of course, God was going to be the one leading the battle with miracles. When Joshua went 40 years later to conquer the land, they blew the trumpet 7 times and the walls came tumbling down. What? Even then, God made miracle upon miracle to enter the land. But they just walked in and the land was theirs. God led the path with miracles. Every day was another miracle to get into the land. But because they lack faith, and the end passage tells it all, what do they say? We were like grasshoppers. And they looked at us like grasshoppers. Really? How do you know how they looked at you? Because when you feel low, when you have low self-esteem, when you have a low opinion of yourself, when you feel you can't accomplish what you have to, you think everyone else is also saying that. Look at her, she can't do anything. You know that the people who lived in Israel, when they heard the Jews were coming, they were trembling in their boots. They were petrified. They heard what happened to Egypt and Paro and the splitting
Ah.
and all the Egyptians drowned. You think they were dummies? It was already in the newspaper. The Torah tells us they were trembling in fear. Yet, how did the scouts look at it? We were like grasshoppers, which means they're giants. They could just step on us.
I see.
And they also looked at us like we were grasshoppers. No, they didn't. But because they had such a low opinion of their ability to conquer the land, they already envisioned that everyone is looking down on them. So it's all about your mindset. The minute they told Moshe, we can't conquer the land, God said they can't conquer the land. They have to
Mm,
want to conquer the land. Even
mm,
though I'm doing all the work, they have to want to go into the land. Your teacher can't make you pass the test if you can, won't you feel you can't pass the test. If your team says, Coach, there's no way we can win, how could the coach make you change your mindset? You already said we can't win. We can't win, coach. Self-fulfilled prophecy. And that's what the problem was here. They lost their faith. It's a very interesting thing when God comes to Abraham at age 99. Remember the story? And he tells Avram, you're going to have a baby. And from that baby, say hachutza, he tells Abraham, come outside. And the commentaries say, come outside where? And God points to the sky and says, you see those stars? You're going to have as many children as the stars in the sky. But what does it mean, come outside? Come outside of your mindset, out of your box.
mm.
What would a normal person say? Me, 99, God, stop today, got caught, I'm too old, I'm too wilted. I can't do it. My wife can't do it. We're not having a child. Don't tease me. And then he wouldn't have had a child. But as soon as God said, come out of your box, come out of your mindset, you're having a child, and from that child will come the whole future of the Jewish nation, Abraham had faith. And that's why he could have a child, even though it's impossible at that age. And that's what was. They lost the faith. Once they lost the faith, God wasn't punishing them by saying you're going to have to stay in the desert. God was telling them, okay, stay in the desert. You want to stay here and keep getting manna, water from the rock, and the cloud and the fiery pillar at night. Stay with me. You don't want to conquer the land. You don't want to fulfill your destiny. Stay here. So it wasn't a punishment. It was a consequence of their actions. And when they said, no, 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 God, no, 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 we want to conquer. No, no, we changed our mind. God said, no, you didn't change your mind. You lost faith. You're not ready to conquer, and then you can't conquer. If I put a sword in your hand, but you don't feel you can use your sword, how is that going to help? So it wasn't a punishment. It was a consequence. If you say you can't do it, you won't do it. Like Woody Allen. I don't like Woody Allen, but he has a funny joke. He says, you know what confidence is? Confidence is something you have before you see the problem. Once you see the problem, your confidence is over. So there's a story of a guy who used to load produce into the refrigerator truck of the train. That was his job. Anyway, he's loading the last parcel of refrigerated goods into the train, and the door of the giant refrigerator slams shut. And he said, my life is over. If I don't get out of here, the train is going to travel for a full day and a half. I will have hypothermia. I'll die. And he's banging on the door and banging on the door. No one hears him. And then he hears the train starting, and he says, that's it. My life is over. He takes a cardboard from one of the boxes and he writes his last will and testament to his wife. Honey, I knew, I had a premonition that one day I would die of hypothermia locked in the refrigerator truck car of the train. And now it's finally happening. I knew it would happen. I love you. Kiss the kids. I'm so sorry. The end is near. Anyway, the train travels. They open up the refrigerator door to take out the produce and they see him lying there. They call the ambulance and the ambulance starts treating him for hypothermia. He's holding on to the thread of his life. So the conductor comes out and he says, what's going on? And they tell him, he says, how could he be dying of hypothermia when the refrigerator was broken? It's a self-fulfilled prophecy. He said he's dying of hypothermia and he's dying of hypothermia. So that's what it is. They said, we can't conquer this land. We can't go. There's giants, there's giant fruit. We're like grasshoppers. It's over for us. So that's why. It's not that they couldn't conquer the land now. They didn't want to conquer. And once they didn't want to, God said, listen, okay, you stay here for 40 years, you'll die out, and the next generation will go in. They'll have a better attitude. They'll be able to conquer. And that's what happens. And when did they come back with the terrible news? The 9th day of Tisha B'Av. They came crying and they gave the report on Tisha B'Av. So God said, you're crying over nothing. You have crocodile tears. This will now be a day of crying for all generations. And I'll give you a reason for crying. And the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed on the 9th of Av. The second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed on the 9th of Av. Persecutions happened on the 9th of Av. When we were thrown out of, expelled from different countries, happened on the 9th of Av. Tragedy after tragedy happened on the 9th of Av. And the first tragedy was this tragedy, where the scouts came back and said, we cannot go into the land. This was Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of Av. So we see also, which is a common theme in Hasidus, is that Jewish mysticism, the actions that you do now have long-range repercussions. It's never like, I could just sit here and do whatever I want. It's my life. Whatever we do, whatever we act, positive, God forbid, not positive, has long-range repercussions and consequences. Never think that your good deed goes unrewarded. And God forbid, never think that when you do something negative, it will just stay and not have a ripple effect. Now, here we see the long-range effect of the sin of the spies, the Meraglim. And I heard a beautiful thing. There's something called, there's a book about it, a fixed mindset and a mindset that is not fixed. Someone who has a fixed mindset, if something happens, something goes wrong, they're not able to conquer the problem, confront the issue, they stop. I'm not doing this ever again. I tried, I didn't succeed, I'm not doing it. And a fluid mindset are people that they conquer challenges like everyone else. But guess what? When they don't succeed, when they fall, they pick themselves up and they try a different way. They try this, they try that, but they definitely try again. The Meraglim who went, the spies who went, were the elite. The problem of being raised like an elite person is your mother and father tell you, you are so talented, you are so smart, you are so great, you are so everything. They're afraid of failure because they're perfect. They're afraid to fail because the mother and father raised them that you're the perfect child. Failure is not an option. But a child whose the parents send them the message, listen, try your best, do your best. That's all we ask for. Sometimes you'll do great, sometimes maybe not so great, but you've tried. Those children grow up to be adults that are not afraid of failure. I failed. It didn't work, this business deal. I'm going to try a different business deal, a different tactic. The problem with being the elite of every tribe is that failure was not an option. How are people going to look at me if I fail? We cannot conquer this land. We're not going to fail. So those who have a fixed mindset, the problem is they're afraid to take a chance. And those who have a fluid mindset are able always to navigate. Like a surfer, you navigate the big waves, the little waves, you fall, you get up. And that's how it is in life. We're always going to be confronted with issues that happen. Are you going to have a fluid mindset? Or are you going to have a fixed mindset? You're going to have the faith and say, listen, I believe that God will take me to the next step. I will be able to conquer the land. And they demoralized the people too. That was the problem. They didn't keep it to themselves. They demoralized the entire nation, began crying. And so why didn't Yehoshua and Kalev fall into the same trap? Because Yehoshua was going to be the successor of Moses. And before he left on this expedition, Moshe called him over and said, your name is Hosea. I'm going to add God's letter in front of your name. You're going to become Yehoshua, Joshua, with a Yud, so that God's name will protect you from anything befalling you. So that saved Yehoshua. Now, why didn't Kalev follow? Kalev comes from the tribe of Yehuda, the tribe of the kings. If you remember the story of Yehuda, one of the brothers of Joseph, he was complicit in selling Joseph to the slave traders. Mm-hmm. And later on, the pain and the regret and the repentance was so great that he left his brothers and his father. He went to live apart. And then when they go down to Egypt to get food during the hunger, and the whole story unfolds where Joseph, the viceroy of Egypt, takes the youngest brother, accuses him of stealing his goblet, puts him into prison. Judah says, no. I already had a brother that we lost. I'm not losing another brother. Give me him and take me. He had a fluid mindset. He made a mistake, but he repaired his mistake. He said, I'm not going to make the same mistake I did with my brother Joseph. And he repented. And how do you know he repented? Because look what he did now. As soon as they try to harm Benjamin, he says, take me instead. I'm not losing another brother. Now, Kalev comes from that family. So Kalev is the same way. If God took us till now, you don't think God could take us into the land of Israel? Why not? The same faith we have all along has to continue. So you see who you come from, how you're raised, gives you your mindset, how you're going to be. You're going to be someone who can never change. And if you make a mistake and you fall, you never go there again. I'll never go there again. I fell, never going back. Like there was a famous climber of Everest, and he failed to climb. He looked at Mount Everest. He said, Mount Everest, I maybe didn't climb you this time, but I'll be back. That's a fluid mindset. You fail. We're all going to fail. We're all going to fall, make mistakes. But the Torah portion is teaching us faith in belief in accomplishing and doing is what gets you through. You don't fall into the abyss because you met up with a brick wall. Like a pessimist says in Yiddish, "Ken allemal sein Ärger." Ken allemal ken ich sein Ärger. A pessimist says, it can never be worse than this. This is the worst it'll ever be. And the optimist says, ken allemal sein Ärger. It could always be worse. This is not the worst. I've encountered worse than this. So when you're an optimist, say, listen, this is terrible, but trust me, there's even worse. You think you have it bad. Go look at Moshe Kapoyer, how he has it. So a self-fulfilled prophecy. You think you're going to pass away from hypothermia? You will. You think? Anyway. So now I just want to bring our attention to one thing a little deeper than this. That at the end of the day, this is the story of the spies. This is the story of the Meraglim. And that's why they were called a community. The 10 spies were called a kehillah, community. So now, why do we have a minyan of 10? Who decided that when you come to shul, if there's 10 men, you can have a minyan, but not 9 men or 8 geniuses? Because God calls the group of spies the kehillah. So now, the kehillah. So now, community. When you want to get together to read from the Torah, say Kaddish, say Yisker, and so on and so forth, it is because you have to have a kehillah, a community. What's a community? 10 men. Why not women? Because the women refused to listen to the spies. They said, what? God promised us the land of Israel. God promised us the land of milk and honey. It's our inheritance. God took us till here. God's going to take us right into the land. We refuse to listen to the tale of the spies. Yes, there's giants and there's giant fruit, but God will protect us. God will take us in. The women never changed their minds. They never swayed. Their belief was solid, rock solid. So because they did not agree with the spies, they tutted the spies, said, tell me another Baba Maisa. God said the women will go into the land of Israel, the children will go into the land of Israel, and the next generation of men will go into Israel, but not this generation of men, because they went along with the evil talk about Israel. They went along with the doom factor, and the women did not. So people say, why can't women be counted as a minyan? Yeah, you could be counted as a minyan, but you were not part of that minyan. It came from a negative place.
Interesting.
So how do we counteract the negativity of that community of 10? We make a positive community. It's an antidote to negativity. You gathered for Lashon Hara, now you're going to gather to pray. Now you're going to gather to read Torah. It's not a negative thing that the women are not what we call counted. We're counted more than you could imagine, but not counted as part of the negativity against the land of Israel. So like one woman said, well, Freida, I want to be counted. I'm like, you want to take antibiotics when you don't have an ear infection? Go ahead, take antibiotics. But why would mitzvahs are not there just because, oh, it sounds so nice. Mitzvahs are there to create connections. Mitzvahs are there to create portals of light. If your portal is open and your light is there, what are you doing? What do you hope to accomplish? You could do whatever you want, but are you looking to connect to godliness, bring godliness into the world, or are you just looking, oh, I want to be like the men? You want to be like the men? Go ahead. No one's telling you can't be like the men, but we all have roles in life. Don't you want to put your energy where it's needed and wanted, and where your light will open a portal? You know, like if somebody says we're having a potluck dinner and everyone is bringing a roast and you're also bringing a roast, say, I want to bring a roast. Go bring a roast, but we need potatoes, we need sides, we need salads, we need desserts, we need beverages. So are you doing something just because you think you want to do it, or are you doing it because it is something that contributes to your mission and purpose in this universe? That's the question I always say. Ask yourself that question. And is you being part of a minyan making you a better, connected more to godliness? Then you have to evaluate what it means to connect to God, maybe. So it's an interesting question, an interesting discussion. Lastly, I want to bring this to one more deeper level. Indeed, you could say this is the story, but I think there's so much more that we could analyze. You know what I always say? There's the story, which I just shared, but really, let's go deeper into Hasidus, Jewish mysticism. How does Hasidus and Kabbalah analyze the story? And it analyzes in two ways, which are really beautiful. The spies self-sabotaged. They self-sabotaged, and they did it for an altruistic reason. They were wrong, but their reasoning was correct. What was their reasoning? We're living in a utopian lifestyle. We can study Torah all day. We can connect to God in such a beautiful, revealed way. Why go into the land of Israel? We're going to have to set up courts of law. We're going to need police stations, fire departments, grocery stores, marketplaces. We're going to need to set up the Beis Hamikdash. We're going to need to cultivate the land. We're going to need to plant and sow and buy and sell, set up schools for the kids, set up preschools and nurseries and hospitals. It's hard work. We don't want it. They did not want to live a physical life, a materialistic life. Everything is perfect here. God, why change it for us? Why give us the headache? We love it here. So they self-sabotage, says Hasidus, so that they could continue living this utopian, spiritual, holy life. So from their viewpoint, they were right. But God is saying to them, to the Jewish people, why did I take you out of Egypt? Why did I give you a Torah? So that you could take the entire world and imbue it with light and godliness and holiness and teach the world what it means to be righteous and good and kind and share and believe in a creator. You have a mission in the world. You were meant to take the physical and material, work in the store and work in the stock market and work in the supermarket and work in the laundromat and set up courts of law and be police and fire department and anything needed to create a civilization and a society of peace and harmony and imbue that with Torah and mitzvahs. How could you do tzedakah in the desert? Who are you giving it to? Who's poor? How could you bring a meal to a mother who just had a baby? Everything in the desert was miraculous. You're living in La La Land. You're in the honeymoon period. After you get married, the honeymoon is over. You both have jobs. Then you get pregnant. You have a baby. You have to live life. Life was meant to be lived in the material, physical, mundane world and imbue it with godliness. So if you stay in the desert, God says to the Jewish people, you're not fulfilling your mission in life. Why did I create you? You need to go to the next phase. So Hasidus explains they didn't do it because they didn't have faith in God. They did it because they wanted to stay status quo. Who wouldn't want it? Who doesn't want to live in mommy and tati's mansion and every meal is cooked and the laundry is done and everything's provided for and you have a Lamborghini you could zoom out anytime and you come back and your clothes are washed and your dinner is made and you have no worry about spending money. It's daddy's credit card, mommy's credit card. Who doesn't want utopia? We all do. But that's not why you were created. And then the last thing Hasidus explains is actually very heartwarming. Remember in last week's Torah portion, we discussed how Eldad and Medad, the two young prophets that were appointed to help Moshe service the Jewish nation with the 70 elders, what did they prophesize? Moshe's dying. And Joshua is going to take the Jews into Israel. Moshe's mission and leadership ends in the desert. Moshe did not go into Israel. So when they heard that their beloved leader is going to die and they're going to go into Israel without Moshe, they couldn't tolerate this. So they self-sabotaged. And 40 more years Moshe lived, and they lived with
Wow.
Moshe. They gave Moshe 40 more years.
Wow.
So they were
Wow.
wrong, but they did it out of love. They could not
Hmm.
fathom a world without Moshe. They could not fathom a world without a leader that took them from slavery and gave them and raised them up to such a high level of living. The thought that Moshe would die and they would go to Israel without Moshe, what? I'm not going. Moshe is not going. I'm not going. And when God saw their dedication to Moshe, he gave them 40 more years with Moshe, and Moshe stayed with his ship. His generation died in the desert. They were buried in the desert, and Moshe died and was also buried in the desert. No one knows
Hmm.
where.
Hmm.
It's hidden. So God created that they stayed with their leader, and their leader stayed with them. You know, we were taught in school Moshe hit the rock, so he got punished. It's not so simple. Moshe hit the rock, but that's the reason he didn't go into Israel. We're going to talk more about it. Moshe didn't go into Israel because a captain stays with his ship. His generation didn't go into Israel, the men. Moshe didn't go into Israel. They were buried in the desert. Moshe was buried with them. A leader stays with his people. The connection is so strong. They couldn't fathom a life in Israel without their beloved Moshe. So they self-sabotaged so that Moshe would live another 40 years. They didn't know that, but they would stay with Moshe, their leader, Moshe Rabbeinu, our beloved Moshe. Their love was so strong for him. Their dedication was so strong to him. And that's true leadership.
Or were they wrong to do it?
They were wrong because I'll tell you why they were wrong. It's hard to go into, but I'll go into it for 5 minutes. They
Okay.
were wrong to do it because that's not what God wanted. It's
Right.
what they wanted.
Right.
At the end of the day, a Jew must always ask, not what can God do for me, what can I do for God? Not what can my country do for me,
Right.
what can I do for
Kennedy.
my country? At the end of the day, it's a two-way street. But a
Yeah.
Jew with a neshama always says, what does God want of me? God didn't want them to stay in the desert. God wanted them to go to their promised land. God wanted them to live in Israel and fulfill his prophecy to the matriarchs and patriarchs. That's what God wanted. So, though at times you think you're doing good for your God, but it's what you want, it's your ego at play.
Hmm.
Deep down, it's your ego. It's a positive thing, but it's still your ego. The highest level of leadership and commitment to the relationship with God is putting your ego aside, even when it seems righteous. You know, the question in Kabbalah and Hasidus is always the evil inclination for a regular person says, eat a hot dog that's not kosher. Desecrate the Shabbos. But for someone who's righteous and holy, like the scouts, the evil inclination doesn't say go eat a Oscar Mayer hot dog. They'll never eat a Oscar Mayer. The evil inclination goes in more insidious ways, holy ways.
Hmm.
Don't go into the land of Israel. Stay here. Here
Wow.
it's cozy and loving and good.
Hmm.
So, with a person who's on that level of spirituality and holiness, the negative inclination, the Yetzer Hara, the animalistic tendencies don't come after something mundane that they know you're never going to do. They come after something very holy. Don't go home to your wife and kids. Stay in shul, daven longer, learn longer.
Hmm.
What are you going home to your wife and children?
Uh,
Remember, like the Kohen, I'm using an example after the Yom Kippur, the Torah commands the Kohen Gadol to go home. Why? Because the Kohen Gadol most probably doesn't want to go home. Why should I go home to my nagging wife and children? Here I'm the high guy. I'm the high priest. I'm the big shot. I'll go home. My wife is going to give me the garbage to take out, unload the dishwasher, help with the kids, diaper the baby. No. So when you're in a very high level, of course, evil inclination is not going to tell you, go rob a bank. They know you're never going to rob a bank. They're going to say, you know, Stay in the
Mm.
desert. Why do you want to go to Israel? You're gonna have to work hard there. Just stay here. You're closer to God. This is what God really wants.
Ah,
So you have to identify what you have to identify. You have to analyze. Is this me really doing it for the right reason, or is there a little bit of an ego involved here? And that's a tug and
yeah,
pull in our lives.
yeah,
So whatever way you want to look at the story, it ends up being tragic because they're 40 more years. But then you don't can't take it on face value either because there's a lot happening here. There's a lot happening. But I think the bottom line here, if you want to take the deeper view that they were loving their leader or that they wanted to continue their life of holiness. But on a practical level, the first analysis really connects most, I think, to me and maybe to you, I hope, where life comes challenges and we're going to fall. Don't be afraid to fall and make a mistake. But belief in God that you could redo, try a different way. We're all going to have the moment. Are we entering our promised land or are we going to run and hide because we're afraid of failure? Enter your promised land. There will be giants, but remember, you're no grasshopper. And don't think that just because you have a low opinion of yourself at times, that everyone is pointing at you and going, her, she's a failure. She's no good. You'd be surprised how people might be looking at you with respect, even though at times you're feeling low about yourself or low self-esteem or unloved or unvalued. You don't judge how other people are looking at you. You never know. You never know. Like, uh, you never know because people don't, you're just projecting that they're thinking that about you, that you're a grasshopper. You're not a grasshopper. They're shivering in their boots, worried about you conquering the land. And you're envisioning, oh my gosh, they're looking at me like I'm an ant under their boot. So don't project that everyone is looking at you and looking down at you when really that's not the case. So sometimes we beat ourselves up and then we think everyone else is also looking at us in a demeaning manner when it's not so. When it's so not so. You know, like I've had my kids say, Mommy, they're looking at me. They're looking at me. I'm like, they're looking at you. No one's looking at you. No one cares about you. Kids always feel somebody's looking at them.
I'm going to my high school reunion this weekend.
Aha. So they're all going to be
Talk
looking
about
at you, Diane.
looking at me. Yep.
So
Oh
I want to
God.
end up with the story and then I'm going to go because I have to have an appointment.
Okay.
So you know the famous Zero Mostel, the famous
Sure.
actor. He was played
Yeah.
Fiddler on the Roof. He played
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So he tells a story. They asked him. He was a Jewish man. They asked him, Zero, how did you get the name Zero Mostel? Your mother and father named you Zero. They couldn't name you 10, Zero. He says, I'll tell you why. It's quite sad. His name was Shmuel Yoel Mostel. Shmuel Yoel. He grew up in a
Yeah. Yeah.
frum home with 8 siblings or 7 siblings. Yeah, 7 siblings. And his father and mother always said to him, Du bist garnished, Shmuel Yoel, and those allemal sein garnished. You are nothing, Shmuel Yoel, and you'll always amount to nothing.
Ugh.
So when he became a famous actor and he needed an
Ugh.
acting name, he gave himself Zero because he remembered what his parents told him.
Ugh.
So you know that the Jews said, we're Zero.
Mm.
And that's why we're not going to the land of Israel. They had a low opinion of
Wow.
themselves. They failed to see that they were godly creations and they did not have the faith that God could bring them into the land. When you don't feel you matter, when you feel you're zero, you cannot conquer the land, even when you have God fighting at your side. So the takeaway, I think, is look at yourself that you matter. You are something. God put you in this world. You fail, pick yourself up and have faith in God that whatever happens is because God meant it to happen. Don't lose your faith. It's hard work. It's hard work to wake up and say, God, I'm in your hands today. I don't like what's happening in my life, but we're going to conquer the land together. Don't leave me because I ain't doing this by myself. And that's the takeaway. Always remember that you matter. You're great and you'll always be great and you will always amount to greatness. Why? Because you have a godly soul and God put you here, not by mistake. You weren't in coincidence. You weren't an accident of your parents in their old age. Like one person told me I was an accident. I'm like, no one's an accident. God put you here and put you here with a reason. Just you have to find out where your promised land is and go conquer it. So I want to wish everybody a beautiful, beautiful Shabbos.